Well, very happy to be in touch with an old friend. John, I've known you since the 70s, I think, back in the mid 70s when you came to Umtali as an SAS medic. So a lot's happened since then, but nice to reconnect. And yeah, John, just let's just start with your family, your background. I know there's a military lineage running through the Graham family. Let's just talk about that, and then up to your time in the SAS.
Yeah, Hannes, it's great to catch up again after all these years for sure. The Graham family. Well, my grandfather was in the First World War with the Worcestershire Regiment and ended up as a captain and acting company commander and was awarded the Military Cross in France.
Right.
And then my father was a Chindit in the Burma campaign. He went out to Burma as a 19-year-old working on a tung oil estate, and the war came and got called up there into the Burma Rifles, and then went in the second Chindit campaign into Burma. You may be familiar with the retreat when the Japanese attacked from the south. He was way down the bottom and had to walk 3 months up into Assam in India. So when he got up there, I mean, he'd lost kilos and kilos of weight. And in his memoirs, he writes, "Who needs Weight Watchers?" Anyway.
Did he talk? Did he talk at all about Wingate? I mean, Wingate's a very controversial general. Did he have anything to say about it?
Not a lot, no. I mean, like many things, we didn't talk much about it, and of course, one regrets that. But fortunately, I got him to do 6 hours of audio tape and picked up quite a bit of the Burma stuff there. I mean, he mentions Wingate, but not in too much detail.
Okay, and then after the war, he comes out to
Well, no, he after the war. So my parents they married in 1945 in April, so the war was still on. He had some leave. So after the war, 46, my mum went out to Burma, and then they had some trouble over there. Well, independence was granted to Burma. There was civil unrest because the guys who fought for the Brits during the war, the Hill Tribe guys, were basically shafted, and so they got a bit uptight and started a bit of a hondo amongst the Burmese people. And so my mother, who was pregnant, came back to England, and that's where I was born. And then after 6 months, she and I went to Burma. And then, say, the troubles increased, and we then went back to England. My father stayed on there until about March 1948, and then all the Westerners were evacuated, and back to England. And our first taste of Africa was actually in Iceland, now Malawi. Dad got a job up in the north in Muzuzu, and to establish a tung oil estate up there.
Okay.
And so in 1952, it was back to England because the winds of change was happening, and so there was a bit of trouble up there, or perceived trouble, and England for a few years, and then to Rhodesia in 1957.
And so how old were you? 57 now?
57, I was, 9.
Okay, so where did you go to school?
In Rhodesia?
Yeah.
Yeah, my first school was Tandai, up in Cashel, because that was Chancellor was full for borders, so went to Tandai.
So what was your dad? England, what was your dad doing now? Was he on?
Now he was at Nyanyadzi. He was an LDO, Land Development Officer at Nyanyadzi.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
And we lived there for 7 years.
Did you live in that house up on the hill there?
That's where we first went. Yes, the top house, as we called it.
Yes.
And that was burnt down in about 1962 with, terrorist attack. Yeah. And then we moved down the hill.
Okay, so school at Tendai in Cashel. Who was in Cashel in those days? The Eltons, the Hayneses. Who do you remember? The
The
Odendals.
Odendals, of course, there were Staines, Maningi Staines, and the Strangs.
Yeah,
Bob Strang was the manager at Cashel Valley Canning
yeah,
Factory,
yes,
and the Miners, the Roberts,
yeah,
because they were at the Mutambara mission,
yes,
um, the Lambs.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. So John, from junior school to Umtali.
Oh, I was only there 2 years, and then went to Chancellor for 2 years, and then to Boys High, Copy
And
House and Palmer House.
and who was in your vintage? Who were your pals at school?
My big pal was Peter Olivey
Yes.
from the Melsetter.
Yeah, now
And
Peter's father was in the LRDG, quite a
that's right.
celebrated.
Yep. Yep.
And then Charles was killed. Charles was
Yes.
killed in our war. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so
Just
the Olivies, who else? Your contemporaries?
Williamson. They came from Cashel. Um,
Yeah.
Derek Dole, Neil
Yes,
Creel,
yes,
Chucky Takanakos, or John Leon Takanakos. Yeah,
yes.
that gang.
Okay. And then after school, John?
Yeah, no, well, I'd originally sort of planned to go into the Merchant Navy. And a guy called Tim Hughes, who was a mate of mine, we both wrote exams for the Plymouth Navigation School. And he passed, I failed. He became an officer on tankers and all that sort of stuff. And my first thing was doing a selection course in 1965.
Wow. That was early days. Who was the CEO of the SAS then? Was that
Dudley Coventry
Dudley Coventry? And where did you do your selection, John?
in Yanga.
Just tell us a bit about that. Who was on it and what actually went on?
Yeah, well, I think about 200 people started to do the selection. Not prior to going to Inyango, we did a lot of physical training and so forth. And so from the very beginning until we finished our selection and all in, I think we had 200 people. We ended up with about 27, 28. So we got to Nyanga. We were dropped off in threes, and basically down the Bonda Mission Road, and then given, I don't know, 8 legs to get there in a certain time, etc., etc. And the speed march up the Mountain Yangani, again, had time limited. And I recall they gave us a psychological test at the top, haven't a clue what the hell that was all about. But anyway, and then they said, "Oh, yeah, that's fine. We'll get down to Pungwi Causeway by such and such a time," and so forth. So, the minute we got off the trucks, it started to rain, and when we got back on the trucks to go back to Salisbury, it stopped raining. So we had a week, 7 days of wet, and say we were in groups of 3, and each day up until about day 6, the other 2 guys with me gave up. So then the next day was put with somebody else and somebody else and somebody else. And then I say the final couple of legs, I caught up with a couple of mates, Jerry Chivers and Dave Parks, and we stuck together, and we got to the RV in time, and big tick for selection course. That was one hurdle out the way.
And then back to Salisbury, and then you did your para course.
Oh, no, back to Salisbury. So the whole thing was about a 14-week course or so. No, it was more basic training and skills, basic skills, medics, signals, demolitions, whatever. And then it was exercise all in, which was up in the Chimani-Manis.
Right.
So off we went. That was a tactical exercise. So the guys in the unit were the enemy, if you like, and they were after us. And they could mess us around for a wee while, hold us up. And so one rat pack for 5 days, I think, was the initial food supply. And we were up on the Bundi Plain. I'm sure you recall all that part of the beautiful country. And the Jack was coming in to drop us resupplies, but the cloud base was so low they couldn't do it. So they said, go back to the outward bound school and we'll send a truck from Salisbury with all your greys. Anyway, the truck didn't come, so it was another 12 hours before we had any food. Anyway, finished that. Good Friday it was. Good Friday 1965. Back on the trucks to Salisbury. Was Easter. Yeah, of course, Good Friday. And they then said, right, okay, you guys have passed. And then we started paracourse. There was, because there was 28 of us, they had to split us into 2 paracourses. So I was on the first one, and the other guys went to Kariba. We did our paracourse for 3 weeks, and then we swapped over.
And once you passed out, badged, whatever, what were your early deployments, John?
Well, I say Kariba was the first one. So we're now pre-UDI. So again, we were said, right, okay, you go on a signals course. So we're into the Morse code and sent us off down to Mana Pools, Chirundu, all the way down the valley to set up our G5 RVs or NFED aerials, and and so we just basically did further training during 1965 until that magic day of the 11th of November.
Do you remember where you were when UDI
I've even got the lockstat right in my memoirs. Yes, we were 2 days before UDI. They called us into the RLI gymnasium, and we were briefed. And they said, we're going to have a 48-hour deployment exercise. And B Troop, that was my troop. Harry Harvey was the troop commander. Mike Higgins was the troop sergeant. I'll talk a bit more about Mike just now. And they said, you're going to Kanyemba. And C Troop, you're going to Kotwa. We looked at each other. Where the hell are these places? Anyway, we flew by Dakota. We flew by chopper to Sipalilo, by Dakota to Sipalilo, and then chopper from there to Kanyemba, because the airfield hadn't been finished at Kanyemba. So the answer was, we were on the Mozambique border on a little track for UDI, and we were told on the radio sked that listen to the radio, because we could listen to Sibi radios on those A510 radios at 1:15, and so the rest is history.
And then, John, did you get involved in any of the planning for the possible British invasion?
Well, no, not me personally.
No,
I mean,
but were you made aware of the fact that it was on the cards?
Oh yeah, we were told, these things might happen.
And what were your tasks going to be if the Brits invaded? Do you remember?
Not really. I mean, we just did what we were told. We patrolled all the way up to the gates, the Maputo Gorge and back.
Maputo Gorge, yeah.
From Maputo Gorge,
yeah.
Yeah.
Wild,
so
yeah,
you're right. Beautiful wild bush and animals, and it was like being on a safari.
Did you bump into the two-toed tribe?
I saw one. He was at the police station. He tracked for the police, but no, those guys, the Wadomo, man, they just melted into the bush.
John, so after that just you carried on with Zambezi Valley border control operations.
We did, yeah. Yes, Kariba was quite a regular posting or deployment, and then down the valley, right down to the Chawari and all the hunting camps all the way up the river. Yeah.
And so, did you go into Mozambique at all to work with the Portuguese?
Well, yeah, we played soccer against them at Villa Zumbo.
Yes, across the river.
Across the river from Kanyamba.
Yeah.
And the main thing was that you always lost, and then they'd invite you into their cantina.
And get you,
if you won, they'd get brassed off, and we'd come home by chopper. Yes, so there were further other deployments, across the way, just to help things out.
And then the following year, John, tragedy. 3 of your guys get killed.
Yes. It happened to be my birthday, the 13th of October, when the OC called us to parade, and he told us of the tragedy that happened on the 12th, where we lost Bob Bouch, Geordie Wright, Mick Cahill, and Police Superintendent John Wickenden, who'd been, sadly killed in an explosion down by Chirundu. Yeah.
They were. What do you know about that operation?
Very little, really. I mean, being in the unit, you're told what you need to know, and not much. No, not much. Yeah.
John, so talk us through. After that, you still operational?
Yeah. So that's now 66. And again, routine ops here or there, border control. And then I broke my leg in 1967 in April, playing soccer. Remember, in the army, you will play soccer, you will enjoy it, Wednesday afternoon sport. And so I was out of action for basically 4 months, tib and fib. And when I came back from sick leave, they sent me to Harare Hospital, casualty, and sort of doing a basic medics whatever. And I guess that's where I got the taste of blood, quote unquote. And then in 68, I went on a formal MA3, Medical Assistant Class 3 course at the Medical Training School in the Welland Barracks. And so that was in July of 68. So October, I qualified as an MA3, promoted to corporal, and posted back to the C Squadron as now I'm medical corps, but so back to the squadron as a medic.
And 68, were you involved in Cauldron at all? Did you go back to the valley with any of those ops?
We were in the valley, certainly 68, Cauldron days, but yeah, nothing too specific at that time. I mean, it hadn't really heated up, so to speak, using that word terminology. 68, yeah. So, mainly Kanyamba, Nyamasoto, Kutsa, all Sipoli, all that northeastern bit is where we were patrolling and doing our thing. Yeah.
Just talk us through your sort of operational experiences after that, John. Where you were deployed and where you operated.
Yeah. So Rushinga was another area that we were in. Musungezi, Mukambura, all up there. And of course, you didn't need a passport to go overseas if you like. Just popped over, did a few things. And I suppose Hawksworth, you remember Hawksworth?
Yes.
He was a land inspector, I think it was.
Yeah.
Who was abducted, so we had to pop over to try and find him. So night jump thrown out at about 500 feet, I think. All of a sudden you're on the ground. And anyway, I reckon we were quite close to him because we found some documents and so forth with his name on. But yeah, December 72, that's when things really started to heat up in the Centenary area, El Tena Farm and Whistlefield Farm.
Yeah.
So we were deployed the day after El Tena was attacked up to Centenary. And then the next night, Whistlefield got done, or early hours of the 23rd of December, I think it was. And the Walgrave family, father and one daughter, went to Whistlefield Farm, and the rest of the family went back to Salisbury, I think. And so young 10-year-old was injured quite severely, and Mark, the father, he was injured as well in the rocket attack on Whistlefield. So then I went there in the middle of the night to do my thing. And it's one thing that always sticks in my mind, and seeing a helpless 10-year-old girl lying there injured. But anyway, an Allied troop medic that was there before me, he'd started to do some first aid. I did what I did. A chopper landed on the lawn 2:00 in the morning, picked father and daughter up. I think took them back to Centenary and then fixed wing to Salisbury. And I've been writing my memoirs and always wondered how the girl was. Anyway, I'll fast forward to 1991. The TV was on, and I was in another room, and I heard a Rhodesian accent. So I shot through, and there was a woman, talking about a medical breakthrough in Auckland. Cut a long story short, it was the sister, it was Jane de Walgrave, that was on the TV. And so once I'd seen the TV article, and then the next day in the Herald newspaper, there was a big article about this medical breakthrough for a son. And I thought, right, I've got to find her. So, we had telephone directories in those days, and tracked it down, had a phone call with her, said this is going to be a very strange phone call. And so I went back to 1972 and all that sort of situation. Wow. And her sister lived, probably still does, maybe in Johannesburg, and married, kids, everything was sweet. So I was able to sort of close that circle in my memoir that, that she was good.
Interesting.
And so that was then.
That was the beginning of Op Hurricane. It
was.
Did you stay in the Northeast, get involved in Op Hurricane?
Well, yes and no, because so we were deployed there just before Christmas. Then we got pulled back, and then I guess we were preparing. Well, then say Hawksworth happened in January 73. So then we went and moved on to that op. So it was about that.
And after that, John, what happened next?
Well, 73, yeah. So I was getting married in March 73. So I got pulled out the bush back into Musungenzi overnight. And then I woke up the next morning. I could hardly walk. My lower back, it was anar, as they say. And anyway, got back to Salisbury, took some bloods and all that sort of thing. And Wendy said, let's go to town and get the wedding ring and so forth. I said, a bit tired. No, you've just been in the bush for 6 weeks. You're right. So anyway, I walked up and down the first street, Salisbury, looking at all the jewelers. What do you think? Yeah. What do you think? Yeah. Anyway, got back to the house and the army ambulance was there. And I was in the Wilkins Infectious Diseases Hospital. And they still don't know quite what it was, but I think it was the Gunji water I drank. Wendy said to them, how long is it going to be in? 2 weeks. No, it can't be 2 weeks. Getting married next week. Anyway, they threw me out, and I did get married on the 3rd of March.
Okay.
To you, and you well know the Lunderstead family.
Yes. Yeah. John, so yeah, just tell us more. What happened? You married now? Where
Yeah.
do you go
So
next?
yeah, we went back to, yeah. I mean, our first house up in Salisbury. We're now March 73. And so as a result of my broken leg, I guess it's a 5-degree bend in the leg, and the orthopod said, "Oh, look, it's probably going to give you some trouble later on in life or whatever." So the hip started to give a bit of jip. So I actually couldn't go do long bloody patrols or
Yeah, yeah.
because the weight. Anyway, so what happened was they medically downgraded me,
Okay.
uh, so I couldn't parachute anymore. So in March 74, about March, April 74, I was posted to Bulawayo Medical Training School as an instructor. So that was so 9 years with the SAS, and then went down to Bulawayo and became an instructor.
Okay. And then you get involved at some stage with Dick Paget and the rehabilitation place in Nyanga.
Oh, well, Dick Paget was when I did my medics course, he was chief instructor
Oh,
at
okay.
the medical training school. So that's where I first met him. And a guy called Tabs Clark and Selwyn Winston, they were instructors. Now, I don't know whether you knew that Dick Paget was a herpetologist.
No, I didn't.
And at the medical training school, there was a snake pit. And so we had our training on snake bites and identification right there for us. Yeah. So if you had a misdemeanor, you had a choice. You could go on a charge or clean out the snake pit. So, so I think most people went into the snake pit, actually. No, nobody got bitten, but yeah. So yeah, it was good. So Dick, that's where I first met Dick. And then later on, when I was posted after my medical training school days, 78, when I went to Umtali, 3 Brigade. I'll just talk about that a little just now. But going back to Bulawayo, so in our medical training, we start off as a MA3, medical assistant class 3, then there's MA2, MA1. When you get to MA1, you then are eligible, if you like, or could be selected to go to Mpilo Hospital for a year, basically as a civilian. And we worked in theatre, anesthesia,
Okay.
plasters, casualty, A&E,
Mhm.
all the trauma type stuff.
Yeah.
So in 1975, basically, I spent my whole year at Mpilo Hospital.
Wow.
Very similar to Houseman,
Yes.
basically,
Yes.
their training.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
And then came back to the medical training school, carried on until 78. Now, I must mention that in 76, so yeah, if you recall, national servicemen could go to university, or should I say, sorry, you leave school, go to university, then come up and do their call up. And then as the war progressed, they tightened the noose and you did your national service, then went to university. Anyway, mid 76, we had an intake of university students. And so they came in and we had them come to the medical training school, a great bunch of people, but they had all this freedom at university, and they thought, oh yeah, they could buck the army system because they were wise guys. Anyway, they soon worked out that they couldn't. But the fantastic course, and out of the 32 guys, about 50% of them actually became doctors, or yeah, and so forth. So, and they were up to every trick in the book. And I'll just recall one story or two. Thursday afternoon was usually practical dressings and splinting and all that sort of thing. So one guy said to me, "What's the dress for inspection tomorrow, staff?" I was a staff sergeant then. And I said, "Look, I couldn't care if you stand there in your jockstrap and tackies. A throwaway line." Anyway, 7:30 the next morning, warrant officer, WO2, and myself doing the barrack room inspection. What do we get? We get 32 guys standing there in their bloody camo under rods, vests, stick boots, berets, brasses, but that's it. Geez, what can we do? So we walk down the barrack room and dirty knees, get those elbows sorted out, and try to make a bit of fun out of it. But this is the sort of humor that these guys had, and they were worried, of course, but as soon as we left the barrack room, we just said, ease springs, and we cracked up, So anyway, so that court, I'll jump forward to 2017, because 5 of those guys on that course were here in New Zealand. 2 of them live in New Zealand, and the others, a couple in Australia, 1 in America. And we went to a braai at Nigel Dickinson's place in a place called Te Araha, which is only a matter of an hour and a quarter from me. And you've heard of Wolfgang Hooker?
No.
Wolf was in the unit. He was a medic,
Okay.
ex-Foreign Legion. Anyway, he and I went over there. So you had the 2 instructors and 5 students at the braai. And it was lovely. 40 years. They hadn't seen each other, some of them, for 40 years.
Wow.
And they'd only known each other for 3 months during the medics course. But they had formed this bond, this friendship.
Yeah,
and so we had this wonderful braai. And it was very humbling, because they said to us, they said, the way you taught us and what you taught us 40 years ago, it stood them in good stead in their lives ahead. And, it was really, say humbling. Because, I really am proud of the medics that we trained, because 3 months, they're in the sharp end, and they're doing things and see things that Joe Blow didn't see.
I'm sure.
Do stuff that doctors even today in hospitals wouldn't even do. So, take my hat off to these guys, and men and women, because we train women medics as well. So, yeah.
John, after Bulawayo, you go to Umtali.
Yes, and I think that your father may have had some influence here as the SMO of 3 Brigade. I got posted to 3 Brigade as the warrant officer in charge of the 3 Brigade medical unit. Right. So that was 78-ish. And shortly after we arrived, the town got stonked. One of the many times it was attacked, rocketed and mortared. And so I was living not that too far from Bear Park store, just around the corner, actually. So Herrick Close, had a Land Rover, and I jumped in the Land Rover, shot down to the medical centre in the 7th Avenues there. And as I was getting over the hill by the hospital on your right, a rocket hit the tree outside the casualty department. And there was one hell of a bloody bang. And I mean, the blast sort of just about lifted the Land Rover across the road a bit. Anyway, be that as it may, got down to the medical centre, and fortunately nobody was injured during that.
Casualties were pretty light, weren't they?
They were minimal.
John, did you spend much time up at Sanger Lodge with Dick Paget?
There's a guy called Gavin Roberts in Glasgow who was a psychologist. He came. We got him into the medical corps in Bulawayo to do assessments for potential medics. Anyway, when I got to Umtali, I got him transferred as a territorial to 3 Brigade, and so we used to go up to Sanger for a night or two. So he was able to, do his psychology thing, and also throw a fishing line in a dam, catch a trout.
Yes.
So fairly regularly, Hannes, we went up to Nyanga, and Sanger.
Most of your work was just at Brigade headquarters.
It was at Brigade headquarters, yes, and we, yeah, because I had national service medics, territorial medics coming through, and of course 5 and 6 INDEP were up at Adams Barracks. So yeah, it was mainly at the medical centre. One interesting story there, we had a guy come in, an African soldier, paralyzed, absolutely paralyzed, lying in bed there as stiff as or whatever. And the guys, in fact, from the medic course that I've just described to you, he was on call up at the time. He said, "Oh, why don't we throw the bones?" They got the old bloody T-bone from the dinner or whatever, and said to this soldier, said, "Well, we're going to take some blood and get the spirits out," and built it all up. And so threw the bones and took some blood, put it into the blood bottle. Nothing happened. So did this a few times, and then we put some citrovescent in the bottle, and so they put the blood in. Blood comes up. This guy out of bed, out the door, never to be seen again. So yeah, mind over matter.
John, did you work with any enemy captures, wounded captures, trying to get them back on their feet?
Yeah, I did. In Umtali, I was called down to the police station and had to treat a woman captor. And she was evil. You just sense that anger and hate and whatever. So anyway, did whatever I had to do and got out pretty quickly. Then when we had assembly points, 79, 80, early 80, I think it was, there was one down at Birchknopp Bridge, and they flew me down there to run a sit parade for these guys. Again, that wasn't too bad. And prior to that, in Rushinga or wherever, yes, there were captors and you had to treat them, sure. But then also we had the Hearts and Minds program, if you like, where we ran clinics out in the bush when we were deployed.
Yeah.
And it was, again, quite humbling because people walked maybe 10 miles to come and get some treatment. And it was all free, of course, because it was, but they'd give you some bananas, some pawpaws, even a chicken, or they were grateful for receiving some treatment for their children and so forth. So
well, that was the tragedy of that war. It was the African civilians who probably took the biggest hammering. But that's the nature of a guerrilla war, I suppose.
It was. If I just go back to Mike Higgins, do you know Mike?
I know the name. I don't think I know him.
Okay. Well, he played rugby for Rhodesia at one stage. He was a hooker.
Yes.
And when I talked to him just a couple of days ago, told him I was doing this, and he said, says, your dad was their family doctor in Umtali, and he was playing for the Rhodesian Goshawks against a Welsh touring side. He can't recall the name. Anyway, he got whacked. He says viciously whacked by Gareth Edwards and cut him over down here. And your dad sutured him up.
Yes. My old man was always busy at those rugby matches. I can remember that. And the other one I remember was I just happened to be at home when my old man was called out, and it was to go and work on Daryl Watt. After Opdinga, I think they got all the wounded blokes at Umtali General, I suppose. I don't know. And I remember Dad coming back saying, he'd just been trying to sort out this bloody tough guy, bloke by the name of Daryl Watt, who'd been shot in the leg. And so I can remember those call-outs quite vividly.
Well, talking of Daryl, when I went into the Wilkins Infectious Diseases Hospital, 2 days later, Daryl was in the bed next to me. We got the same whatever.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
John,
So
yeah, any other memories that you want to talk about?
yeah, I just say in the Kanyemba area, um, there were three of us on patrol up. If you know that area, was what's called the gates. So you've
Yeah,
got the gorge,
yeah,
and then you come down, and you've got the gates and the
yeah,
big curve in the river.
yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
so we're between the gates and the gorge,
Yes.
and I think I was a radio operator then, so I had the headset on and doing Morse code or whatever, and I'm looking around, and my mates are nowhere to be found. And they look up, and there they are up the tree, and they're pointing, and there's a rhino 50 yards away, just looking at us.
Yes.
But well, anyway, it didn't take long. Headset off,
Up the
up
tree.
the closest tree. Of course, they picked the best one. It took me about 2 minutes, or 10 seconds to get up, but it took me about half an hour to get down. It was a real thick thorn tree.
Yeah.
But anyway, so there I am up the tree, and I was pulling out bloody thorns for weeks. But the rhino was not going to do anything. It was, but anyway, yeah.
But some guys
And
did
then we
have.
had a guy taken by a crocodile at the gates. Yeah, in fact, I was up there at about midday. We're giving resupply from Kanyemba up to the gates. And, you swim, you get in the river. A couple of guys with the FNs, looking for crocs. Got back in the boat, back to Kanyemba. 5 o'clock, the radio crackles. Man taken by crocodile. Yesterday. So we get in the police boat, go up, and bring him back down to Kanyemba. Can't get him Kazovac or anything. So kept
So
him
what
overnight.
actually happened? He managed to get away.
Well, he was just knee deep in the river,
Mm.
and he felt a tug on his leg, and he kicked, and it must have been about a 3-footer or something.
Okay.
And he then the croc came in again and took him up in the groin, and yeah, so I think he was a bit worried about his tackle, but anyway, so he went back to Salisbury in the back of a Land Rover the next day, all cotton wooled up and drugged up. And anyway, fell in love with the nurse who happened to be a Kiwi. And anyway, left the army, came to New Zealand. Oh, it was only here about a year, I think. And he couldn't hack it. It was so cold. Bushman all his life. Anyway, back to Rhodesia, came back to the unit, did another selection course. I don't think he needed to, but he said, no, I've got to do it. And a couple of minutes in the boxing ring, as you did. And he, about a couple of hours after, they said, I've got a bit of a headache. I'll take a lie down. Dead. Brain aneurysm.
Yeah, that's TC Woods. I remember that. I remember when that
That's
happened.
the one, TC.
Yeah,
And
tragic.
his daughter, Jo, lives here. She's in New Zealand. I have met her a couple of times, talked to her fairly frequently. And because she wanted to get a bit of information about her father and photographs and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
so
yeah.
I met her because she actually came to stay with Terry Roach, who was
That's
the
right.
man in the ring. And
Yeah.
I was with Terry this morning, so we're
Mm.
still in touch. And I met TC's daughter in Zambia.
Right. That's right. She worked there for a while. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, very sad.
So
He
it
was
was.
by all accounts a hell of a guy.
Yeah, he was. Oh, they must go back to Centenary 72. So once the De Boer graves had been casevaced, so it'd been up all night, so sort of go have a bit of a few minutes sleep. Anyway, it wasn't long after that RLI hit a landmine outside Whistlefield Farm, and Norman Moore was seriously injured. So went out there, picked him up, brought him back to Centenary, and I casevaced him in a trog to Salisbury. And I mean, he was seriously injured. And I mean, I struggled to maintain an IV line during the flight. And unfortunately, he died a couple of days later. Yeah. So, yeah, sad times and good times in life. And that was a sad one, of course, when you lose somebody.
But I think John, you got to look hard to find anybody who doesn't have a good word to say about the medics. The whole medical corps in the Rhodesian army was obviously staffed by very capable people, and it was a very well run part of the army. Served the army very well indeed.
Well, again, I'll just add with the family, the Bulgrove family, SAS medics happened to be in the right place at the right time, because father, he was at a vehicle accident, I believe, down Shirundu Way, the old sugar estate place, Senna, or whatever it was called.
Oh, yeah.
And Wolf, my mate, who lives just in Cambridge, 20 minutes away from me, he was in the area, so fixed him up. And then I think he was also gored by a buffalo or something. And again, Wolf happened to be in the area
Really?
and fixed him up as well. So 3 incidents, we were Johnny on the spot. So,
John, a question a lot of people ask me is about snake bite.
yeah.
There weren't that many snake bite incidents. Is that right?
No, you're right.
It's surprising. I mean, there are lots of snakes out there, and there were lots of guys trudging around in the bush, but not many people did get bitten by snakes. I don't know. There were lots of near misses, but actual bites.
Well, I had one guy who came to me and said, I've been bitten by a snake, bitten by a snake. Oh, yeah. So I have a look, lower leg, and there was a scratch. In no way was it a snake. Oh, I need the anti-venom. I need the anti-venom. I said, look, you're probably going to react to the venom, anti-venom.
Mm.
And anyway, he insisted. So I said, okay. So he got bloody, 10 mils in both buttocks. And it wasn't long. His eyes swelled up. And he had an allergic reaction to and yeah, no way was it a snake bite. There's a guy called Costa Palentis. I don't know if that name rings a bell.
No.
He was on my selection course, Barrackram, and he had an ingrowing toenail. He insisted that I take his ingrowing toenail out. I said, Costa, I said, by putting the injections in and so forth is going to be more painful than getting that nail, sorted. No, take it out, take it out. Bloody 2 guys had to sit on his chest while I put the injection, the ring block in his toe, and then I whipped out the nail. Then he said afterwards, it was a Greek fellow, Palentis. He says, "You're right, John." He said, it was bloody sore. Yeah. Part of the medical training course, the 3-month course, the last 2 weeks was in the bush, putting all their theory and practical stuff into practice under scenario situations. So you get a group of 6 or 7 medics, and you say, right, you've got earache and you've got whatever, and you're the medic. So there's one situation, and the guys themselves set the scene. So you remember Super Flame, the tin of bloody petroleum stuff to cook you.
Okay,
yeah, Super Flame. So they got Super Flame and put it all the way around this fellow, and they got a bit of cloth and diesel, and the smoke was pouring out of this guy's chest. Burns. So you've got a burns here, you've got a snake bite over there, and so they got to sort it out. And they put the Super Flame all the way around the guy. Now, if you light meths and it's daylight, you can't see the flame. So whoever was a medic, he's burns, got to check the airway, got to do this. And he was crouching around the guy, and his bloody arse caught fire because he couldn't see the flames, the ring of fire around. And nobody said a thing, good old army black humor. Just get on with it, boy. So, and so it was all good fun.
John, how long did you stay in the army after independence?
I left in January 81.
So you didn't
stay. Not long, 9 months or so. It just became untenable because, you've got 3 armies in one now, and we were all friends, but discipline just broke down.
Yeah.
It just, if you reprimanded somebody,
Mm.
they'd go to their political commissar
Mm.
and say, "Oh, these bloody, and
Racist.
it just so that led to, and again, I think your father had some influence there, the formation of the 7th Avenue Surgical Unit
Mm-hmm.
In the medical centre above your dad's practice.
Yes, sure.
And so I became the administrator of that unit.
Oh, okay.
And the beauty of that was because of my medic training, and again, your father, he would come to my office and say, "Oh, I need a hand. I'm doing an operation or whatever." So I put the pen down and I'll scrub up and go and give him a hand in the theatre around the corner.
Really? Yeah.
And yeah, it was the best of both worlds.
Well,
And then I
interesting.
do remember one situation. I won't mention the name, but you might work it out. Burma Valley,
Mm.
a farmer right on the border.
Mm.
He actually, this is after the war,
Mm.
tramped on a AP mine
Mm.
and serious leg injuries,
Mm.
brought into the clinic.
Yes.
So your father tied what he could up. So emergency surgery, I helped him, and Dr. Narroway was the anaesthetist, Peter Narroway. And the next day he got transferred to Salisbury and got, the
Yeah.
specialist care. So
Yeah.
yeah. So even after independence,
Yeah.
unfortunately, these things happen.
No, I know that was a terrible day. Obviously, I know exactly who you're talking about. In fact, it's Pi Hildebrand. I don't think there's any issue. Pi's,
Yeah.
he's in Australia, but yeah,
Yeah.
he dealt with that particular setback with great courage and resilience. Old Pi put his life back together very quickly.
Yes. I am in touch with him. Yeah. So that's, yeah. So back to Llewellyn Barracks. So you've got all these students at the medical training school. So they've got to practice injections. So you've got your national service intakes coming in. And on the Saturday, their first Saturday, TABT injection.
Mm-hmm.
So who does it? The students. Of course, the instructors are making sure they're doing it properly. But their sense of humor on this particular course, they've got an oral, the ear syringes.
Mm-hmm.
They're quite big tubular things. And they got a lumbar puncture needle and stuck it on the end, filled it up with water. And they're sort of standing at the front of the line, pressing the thing at the bottom and bloody water shooting out the top. And there's this line of bloody 18-year-olds doing their national service. They're fainting left, right, and centre because oh, God. Anyway,
Those
they
are the
got
days.
there.
John, I'm gonna run out of power. We've got a power cut coming at 8. Is there anything else?
I just mentioned these guys that we had the braai at. I mean, one of them is a psychologist in Sydney, and he does a lot of work with ex-military, both Rhodesian and Australian Defence Force, in psychology, PTSD. The one guy, Richard Ward, I mean, he's in America, opened a company, did well. They're all,
They've done well.
They've done well. Engineers and so forth. So Nigel, Steve Gardner, Barry Zworenstein.
Does the name Russell Pridgeon ring a bell?
The name rings a bell, and he's as a medic.
Yeah, he was also a medic.
Yeah,
probably that vintage. Actually, he's also then went on to become a doctor.
Yeah. I mean, there's about 3 or 4 doctors in New Zealand that came through the medical training school.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
they produce some quality guys.
Yeah. So,
no,
Hannes, it's great talking. I mean, whether this has been of any value to anybody,
wonderful,
or will be.
Wonderful, John.
So, yeah,
appreciate it.
That's all right.
And we'll stay in touch.
So, I sent those photos through. So I don't know.
Yeah, and then
John's great at putting it together.
John will get hold of you. He'll put it all together, send it to you, and then if you're okay with it, we'll put it out there.
Okay.
All right.
That's good.
Thanks.
Well, thanks for your time, Hannes.
Thank you, John. Our lights are about to go off. So
okay.
Power cut. Cheers.
Cheers. Okay. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.